Welcome to the first of 3 cybersecurity workshops. My name is Marvigel Willu, and I'm the Learning and Member Engagement Specialist for Silicon Valley Council of Nonprofits. A few housekeeping items before we begin. While I go through today's guidelines, we'd love to learn who is in the room with us. Please introduce yourselves in the chat by sending your name, title, and organization, pronouns, and native land. We will recap the items to share. As a continuing SVCN practice, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the land that each of us are on today. In San Jose, California, we are living, learning, and organizing on the land of the Muwekma and Tamiya-Ohlone tribes. Together, let us commit to educating ourselves and advocating for Indigenous peoples, communities neglected and displaced by the US government, and other colonial powers across the world. I know people here are tuning in from different areas, so I encourage you to learn what land you are living on by using the website we'll share in the chat, and share that information in your introduction. For accessibility purposes, we do have the automated closed captioning feature in Zoom activated. Now with this, you do have the ability to move that captions around on your screen to a place more convenient, or you can disable the closed captioning feature entirely if you prefer to not have it up. To do so, please reference the bar at the bottom of your Zoom, click on Live Transcript on the right, and then click Hide Subtitles. If you're having any tech or other troubles during the session, please private message me directly in the chat. We do ask that you remain on mute throughout the program. Please use the chat to send questions. There will also be time at the end for a Q&A. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers on Pocket Security, Keaton Fisher and Lita Muller.
All right, great, thank you very much. So I'm gonna share my screen. Thanks for having me today. There we go. Okay, does everybody see the screen?
Yep, we can see your screen.
All right, perfect. Well, thank you again for having us on Pocket Security today. I'm filling in for Ashley. She was unable to make it today, but hope I can fill her shoes. And then we will have Keaton Fisher as well. So Cybersecurity 101 for nonprofits. All right, basically what we're gonna cover today is myself, Lita Muller. I founded Pocket Security. We're a nonprofit for nonprofits. So very exciting to be here. And Keaton Fisher, who is our, as you saw, oversees our security awareness along with Ashley. We're going to talk about what information technology is versus cybersecurity, because those are two different things, and wanted to address that with you because I know a lot of people say we have an IT person, so wanted to review that. Why cybersecurity is important for your nonprofit, and tips for being more secure in your organization. Talk about assessing your environment, and then we'll have a Q&A at the end. If you do have questions though, Keaton will be monitoring the chat so you can take a look at what's going on in the chat. All right, information technology and cybersecurity. So basically, information technology focuses on the systems that store and transmit your digital information. So if you think about it, your computers, you got your laptops, your desktops, your servers. And cybersecurity focuses on protecting the electronic information stored in those systems. So many of you may have an IT person that does your help desk that gets you up and running on your computer, that wants to make sure that you can get your work done. That's your information technology. But they're not always thinking about the data that you have within your system and how that's moving from one location to another. So what is cybersecurity and why is it so important to the nonprofits? There's an agency called CISA, which is the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency. And they talk about cybersecurity as the art of protecting your networks, your devices, and your data from unauthorized access or criminal use, and the practice of ensuring confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. And those in security, we like to call that the CIA. Your confidentiality, your integrity, and the availability of your information. So why is this important to nonprofits? Because nonprofits actually, as a nonprofit, you are dealing with data. You're dealing with data that you store on your computers, on your servers, and some of you may have it also on cloud providers or software as a service providers. And this data needs to be managed very carefully. And if you're not protecting your data, then cyber criminals can exploit that data. Examples of what we call sensitive data are social security numbers, addresses, names, bank credit card information, passport information. This is information that you may have on your donors or your clients. Also medical information, the ID cards, right? So you want to think about where's this data, how is it being stored, and who has access to that data. External data sources, or it's data like hosted on websites or on the internet. Unsecured nonprofit websites publicly facing on the internet. If you look at the information that you're putting on your publicly facing websites, think about that information that you're sharing. And that is out there for everyone to see. So a good thing to do would be like review that data and see, is this really a need to know on the whole world to be public? Or should this information be kept privately within your organization and accessed by only those who need that access? 4.24. I'm not sure that number. What is that? A date? I don't know. Think about that number. 4.24. It actually is breaches. If you're breached, the average breach costs $4.24 million. So the average breach costs $4.24 million. So that's something to think about. 600%. So that's not inflation, but no. What is 600%? In the last 2 years, cybercrime has reached 200%. Stealing data, getting information, it's gone up 600%. So that is a high percentage. 90%. This number can vary. I've seen it at 70%, I've seen it at 80%, and I've seen it at 90%. So I think it depends on the time of year. This is basically how many times that we're phished through phishing, people clicking on the links. 70, 80, 90% people click on the links from phishing emails that puts malware onto your computer, and it gets into your system, and then it starts doing what the malware is being asked to do, which could also lead into ransomware. So not a good thing, but that's a very high percentage. So we're going to go over the next slide to tell you about the different years of what's happened. So what you have listed here in front of you are nonprofit organizations. In 2015, the Utah Food Bank was phished, and you can look up this information, but they were compromised. In 2019, another nonprofit, People Inc. In 2020, Blackbaud, you may have heard of that. Blackbaud was also compromised. And in 2022, the International Committee of the Red Cross was hacked as well by a phishing email. So this information is out there, but this just shows you that nonprofits are not immune to the cyber bad actor, right? There's information that we want. They want our information. Information data is worth money, and they go after whoever they can. So this, as I mentioned earlier, this little mouse, it's much like a little mouse. I like that. So in the Red Cross cyber attack, the malware actually was created, tailor-made for how the infrastructure and antivirus was set up within the Red Cross. So the bad guys knew what they were doing. They knew about the Red Cross infrastructure, and they knew what antivirus they were wearing. They had. So they knew how to get around it. So you really need to have your checks and balances and be careful of what you have out there. Okay, what we're gonna look here is how can cyber criminals access my nonprofits in my environment? Suspicious emails, texts and phone calls. I know recently I've actually been getting a lot of texts from Wells Fargo, and I don't even bank with Wells Fargo. So really be careful. Texts are on the rise, and phone calls as well to get your information. Social engineering. We've heard about it. Think about what you've got on your LinkedIn profile. What does it tell about yourself? What's on your Facebook? What information is out there that the bad guys can help social engineer you? Malware is something that we talked about. A lot of that comes on payloads within phishing emails, either in PDFs, zip files, or also just clicking on a link that brings you somewhere to a website that could download that malware to your computer. Software and computers that have not been patched. I know, Microsoft patches, and there's been a lot more patches as well for the Apple Macintosh. I know back in the day, everybody said, oh, Macs don't get viruses. Well, guess what? They do. And they've been patching a lot more. The reason why these companies are patching your systems is because they know there's a vulnerability, right? They know that there are issues with Microsoft Word or Excel. These patches come out to go fix problems that are already on your computer. And lack of security assessments. That's a question I'll ask later. But are you doing an assessment in your organization, right? Have you gone through and done a security assessment? So here we have, encourage awareness and secure behavior change in the office and remotely. So now that a lot of us are working from home, one is make sure that, are you connecting to your network, to your home network, or are you connecting to another network? You want to make sure that you're secure at home as well, right? There's a lot more people, your kids and other people may be getting onto your network, and information could be getting onto your network that you don't want to download onto your computer. Provide tools that secure access to the nonprofit. We talk about a virtual private network. Some of you may have a virtual private network where you're actually connecting to your network. And that's a way to do that you're also having an antivirus solution on your computer, that it's scanning for that. If you do go to a bad website, it'll alert you, or if you're downloading applications, it'll alert you that this may not have, it may not be a safe and secure application. And use our assessments to find weak spots in systems, data permissions, and software. Again, going back to the assessments, is kind of looking in your organization, making sure that inventory, looking at who has access to what. Is your software outdated, or is it being patched, right? So these are things to think about to make you more safe. It's like, cleaning house or keeping your house clean. So cyber criminals, this is an interesting slide. Cyber criminals know our emotions and they know how to use us against us. Awareness can become more self-aware of what we're doing, and they play to our emotions. So one of the ways to communicate with your team, if you have Slack, if you have Microsoft Teams, newsletters, emails, right? Those are ways that you can let people know about what's going on in cybersecurity. Awareness topics that you can talk to them is the think before you click, and why suspicious indicators are very important to know. What are they asking, right? I'll tell a story about, and it happened here in Silicon Valley. There was a company where the president was out of town, and the admin knew that the president was out of town. They were looking to buy some property in another area outside of this country, and they found the area. It was actually in China, from what the CEO said, and asked for the assistant to wire over millions of dollars, because they found it and they wanted the money wired over. And the assistant knew that their CEO was traveling, but didn't do that follow-up question and ask, is this you? So they ended up wiring the money. And once it leaves the country, we can't get the money back. And the money did not go to the CEO. So think about what people are asking you. Think about, should they be asking? Another story that I have is, I'm not sure if many of you are basketball fans, and actually today's the 18th, so for federally doing your taxes. But about 5 years ago, an accounts payable person, again, got an email from their CEO, and this was the Milwaukee Bucks basketball team. And they said, send me all the W-2s of all the players. And they questioned, but they went, well, the CEO is asking for it. I'm going to provide that information. And they did. And again, the CEO was not asking. And the other question is asked, should the CEO be asking for W-2, right? That's more of an HR role, not the CEO. So the Milwaukee Bucks players from 5 years ago, all that personal information from their W-2, their social security number, their address, all that information is out there, and it wasn't the CEO. So those are things to think about is, questions, should that person be asking you for something that should they have or should they not have? So another awareness to, again, recognize people who bring up security risks and ideas. If somebody's going to bring some information to you about, again, CEOs asking me this question, should I do that? Right? You want to award them and let them know that, keep your eyes open, right? We want to more eyes and ears out there about what people are seeing or hearing, because you could get that suspicious email and go, this doesn't make sense to me. So make sure people are aware and let them know that they can ask those questions, because they will, as this mentioned, prey on your emotions. I know myself, and I'm doing security every day. There's been times where it's like, wait, does this email make sense, right? Like for example, FedEx has a delivery, click on this link, right? And you know that you've ordered something, but the link it just doesn't seem right. But they're preying on your emotions or preying on you moving so quickly that you may click on that link. So things do happen. Okay, so password help. I'm not sure how many of you are writing down your password on a sticky. I hope none of you. What we have out there, a password manager. We have so many places to log into now that reusing the same password or just adding 1, 2, 3 to it or 4, 5, 6 doesn't help. I think the top password of 2022 was like password 1, 2, 3, 4, and maybe they put a exclamation point at the end. There's something called Password Manager, and you can Google this as well. There's various types of password managers out there that will help. You just have to memorize one password, just one password. And you don't even have to memorize. I'll give you a secret. You could actually store that password in Google Drive or in your OneDrive and call it something totally different, like hot dog recipe or something that doesn't make sense, but and that would be your master password to getting into one of these password managers. And in your password manager, it will have all these other passwords. It could generate passwords for you. So I use actually a password manager, and it's very, very helpful. They also talk about passphrases. You could also do a passphrase, which is something that you would remember, but then you could put in like a 3 instead of an E. So a song or a lyric that you like, but putting in those different characters, that helps with passwords. There are websites that do autofill the passwords, and same with the password manager. I know Google does that as well, and I think the Safari with an Apple. But definitely think about that the passwords, because if you have one password or two passwords very close, and you do get hacked yourself, the bad guy can then use that password and try it on other sites, right? So if I'm using the same password on my banking, on my email, then they can use those credentials across the board. Multi-factor or two-factor authentication. This is basically, something that something you have, and something you are. So if it basically, you log into an email and then you get a text message or another company, like I'll just say Duo, for example, you can approve for it. You have your phone with you. You can click on it and then it lets you access the system. More and more banks and more organizations are using multi-factor authentication, because those are at least 2 or more things that you need to have and know to be able to get into your system. Because again, if somebody can get your password, then they could potentially log into other systems. And then sharing via email. This was a question I know people ask about secure email. A lot of our email, when you have HTTPS, a lot of our email now is encrypted. You have Gmail, Office 365, something called Proton Mail as well. I think there's a fee for that, but that's encrypted. The way some companies also and organizations, if you put secure : there's different providers that can make the secure email. So if I'm sending Nick, I'm just looking at you right now. So if I'm sending something to Nick and he's outside my organization, if I put secure in front of it and I'm have this application, you actually, when you open the email, it would ask you for the first time to create a login, a username and password to be able to see that email. So the email is going into the secure location. Picture a box, for example. It's going into that secure location and you're getting the email from there. And then that's a way to do it secure as well. Okay, here is an example of phishing emails. I know, many of you, again, if you're moving quick, if you're moving fast, this example is an email from Bank of America. They've got their great logo, they've got their name, Bank of America. But when you look at the from, it's from crvdqi@comcast.net. That's not a Bank of America email, right? So those are things to look for. Also the two, undisclosed recipients, it's not coming to me. Look at how they do spelling. Now the emails, I will have to say, phishing emails, they've improved over time. And it's very hard to spot phishing emails these days, but still look for these things like spelling grammar mistakes, links that don't go anywhere. There's a link that goes not to location. So that link for Bank of America, if you hover over it in the example here, it says bit.do and it has a whole bunch of letters. That's not a Bank of America site, right? So they want to create the sense of urgency, like I mentioned before, the causing to your emotional responses. And they, you think, okay, I bank with Bank of America, I'm going to go there. There's also this right here, there's a phone. Again, I mentioned earlier, I'm not a Wells Fargo client customer, and I got a Wells Fargo text. Okay, so they're just getting numbers, they're sending information, they want you to click on the links. QR codes are all over these days. When you're going out to eat now, they're all over. Make sure when you're scanning the QR code that you're getting to the right area, because you don't know where that QR code could potentially take you. So what suspicious do I do if you're faced with this activity? Call and text the person that they're actually sending it to you, right? Even if I am a Bank of America customer, call them, make sure that that's what they're trying to get in contact with you. Report the phishing scam, let the bank know, hey, I got an email that somebody's impersonating you. Search links using online tools. Again, go to the website, type it in yourself. Don't click on links. If you're not sure, go to the site itself and make sure that you're looking for the right information. And reporting it, letting each others know within your organization that this is going on, right? Share that information. And then working remotely, I touched on it earlier, but this, I know a lot of us are hybrid. If you're going out, avoid sharing your information on social media. I know a lot of people are like, hey, I got a new job, and then they put their work ID badge with their face and their information on their LinkedIn profile or on their Facebook, right? Think about what you're posting out there, because that information is out there and people can get that information. Use antivirus and your router's up to date. When you're at home, especially, you may get firmware updated to your router. If you have AT&T or Comcast, make sure you're getting those updates. And again, as antivirus up to date, patching, because when they're doing patches and when they're updating, they know that there's an issue out there in the wild. Avoid using public Wi-Fi for sensitive tasks. There's been a lot of times where, you may go to a Starbucks or a hotel that somebody could put a Wi-Fi router and call it, Starbucks, or call it Hilton Hotel. So you want to make sure that if you are using that, and if you have VPN on your computer, use VPN, because you're not sure what Wi-Fi, that you're connecting to when you're out in public. And just stay alert of your surroundings. People can shoulder surf, that's a tongue twister, and kind of look at what you're doing when you're typing things in. So just be aware of that if you're out there. Okay, a comprehensive assessment, and I mentioned this earlier, a security assessment. So a comprehensive assessment, security assessment, identifies potential vulnerabilities in your organization. We talked earlier about sensitive data. Have you classified your data? Have you classified your donor data? Have you classified what information you're collecting? You could say low, medium, high risk data. You could say public and private data, or public, private, confidential data. Think about your data and think about where it's stored, right? Asset inventory technology ownership. This is going to, again, the assets within your organization. Do you have an inventory of all the systems that you have out there, and who owns them, right? Are you using systems that people are bringing their own device? Are you using systems that you're issuing? And if you are issuing them, are you managing them? Are you encrypting the computer? You know, those types of things you need to think about and know where all your assets are. Access management, touched on this a little bit earlier as well. Access management is who has access to what, right? It's basically the need to know. A big part of it, and I've heard this from companies and small organizations, we may be really good at onboarding an employee. We give them the access they need, we give them the information they need, and as they come along in their journey as an employee, they get more information, they get more access to different things. And when they leave, sometimes we may not remember that, you know, take all the information that we've added them to remove it. And if that employee's username and password is still out there that they could use, we haven't deactivated, for example, and they get compromised, if I'm the bad actor, I now have access to all the information that they had. So if you take away anything, that onboarding, offboarding especially is a big process. And I've heard it from big companies that they too have problems with it. And this can give somebody a lot of access if their credentials get compromised. Third-party vendors, contracts, assessments. This is something, again, you may do business with a third-party vendor. You have somebody that's managing your software or your application. Do an assessment on them, because sometimes they may contract out to somebody and there's a fourth party and a fifth party. What type of assessment are they doing? What kind of onboarding and security are they doing with that third-party vendor? So you want to take a look at that with your third-party vendors. Look at the writing that you have in your contracts and look at, you know, from a security point of view, what are they saying that they're going to do if they're hosting your data and they get compromised? Are you getting alerted? What benefit do you have if that happens? Your systems and application servers, again, what you have on your systems, applications, know where they're at. That's kind of part of the inventory. And then people, employees, volunteers, board of directors, donors, very important. We have lots of different people involved, especially in nonprofits, and we just want to make sure that, you know, we're keeping their information safe and they're keeping the information safe that they have access to. So think about your organization. So what I've covered, think about it. I'm going to hand it over to Keaton now. So thank you very much, and I'll check out the chat channel as well. Keaton?
Thanks, Lita. Yeah, so
next slide.
Just
I'll move your slide.
What was that?
I'll move this slide.
Oh, actually, if you can go back 2 slides.
Okay.
Thank you.
There you go.
Yeah, so just to dive deeper into some of the assessments that the leader mentioned for a moment. So we talked about assessments quite a few times over the slides. And one of the more difficult things within security is actually, how do you quantify risk, right? So you've done all these things, you implement certain controls or actions, you follow certain advice, but how do you actually quantify what risk remains in, to your organization? And again, one of the ways we can attempt to do that is through assessments like these. And there's many types of assessments, as Lita mentioned, and what some of these assessments might look like, for example, could be assessing your organization against a framework like the NIST CSF, which is basically a gold standard of controls, of security controls or actions that your organization can implement to reduce risk. And this framework actually serves as a baseline for others, such as PCI or HIPAA, and it's a great start to strengthening your security posture. So not all of the controls will apply to your organization in particular, but you can definitely look it over to gain an insight into some of the areas that your organization might be stronger or weaker in. And when people come to me and they ask, how do we get started on building out some kind of security posture, my answer is always recommending the NIST CSF, because that's going to give you a wealth of information. And some other assessments. So, an assessment might also look like, assessing your systems, your devices, your servers, your endpoints, or assessing your people. How vulnerable are your people to social engineering? Somebody in chat earlier said that their friend thinks they were targeted through LinkedIn. Social media is one of the first place an attacker can look, right? If an attacker is building out some kind of attack methodology against a company or against whatever target. That's the recon phase. It's looking through social media of different employees. It's finding as much information as they can, because, you know, why do they need to bother with heavy technical stuff if they can just get in through the weakest link, which is unfortunately people. So assessing not just your systems but your people is crucial as well. So there's a multitude of areas, again, that you can create security assessments from to understand and quantify your organization's areas of risk. Again, the NIST CSF is probably one of the best places to start. It's going to introduce you to frameworks such as PCI and HIPAA, which could be required for a few of the organizations here, depending on which, or depending on what data you store and transmit. So I highly recommend looking into that. That also, again, ties back into the one of the questions that I seen earlier, that I asked about the best practices for securing a network used by students. Again, NIST is going to introduce you to policies and actions that you can implement, including bring your own device policies, and is a wealth of information. And next slide, please. So yeah, if you think about your organization, you know, think about your nonprofit, what kind of data do you handle or see? You know, are you handling donor data, maybe employee, volunteer data like names, socials, addresses, financial info? Do you handle any health information? So asking yourself these types of questions is going to allow you to better understand your environment and what you should start adhering to, such as PCI or HIPAA, or at the very least, you know, start beginning to think about how much information do your systems hold? What do they point to, et cetera, et cetera? Think about the possible information that could be leaked and how impactful that might be to your operations, your reputation, your people or donors, right? Think about if the data you have, the data you're transmitting is leaked, think about the impact of that. Think from the perspective of an attacker, you know, what would you target first if you were trying to gain some kind of information from your organization? This is going to help you kind of map out in your mind some of the weaker or stronger parts of your organization's posture. And again, this might seem like an information dump, right? It might seem pretty overwhelming. It's a lot of information to take in at once, but it's pretty crucial information. As we've heard before, and as Lita mentioned earlier, if we don't have this preventative stuff in place, if we don't have this kind of risk mitigation in place, we could be in a whole lot of trouble, right? We could be fined. Lita mentioned that $4.24 million figure as the average cost of a breach. We could lose trust, reputation. That's a pretty important factor of nonprofits. So, some of the work we do is definitely based off of trust. And oftentimes as nonprofits, we don't have the advantages of a for-profit entity, right? We can't just throw $5 million out and, you know, forget about it until some other time, right? We can't spend millions of dollars in marketing to make everyone forget we had a huge breach. So starting to think about your organization's risk is important. So you can, again, begin mapping out areas that you might need to take a look at. And then I'll go ahead and hand it back over to Lita for the next couple slides. And you're still muted, by the way, Lita.
I have too many windows going up. Sorry about that. So thank you very much, Keaton. Yeah, good information. Definitely, you know, the risk, especially nowadays, and so much information out there. So here's some information right here. Attackers from the University of Maryland. Attackers hack every 39 seconds. And I believe that. On a Slack channel that I have, Bleeping Computer, they're just, it's always on, always things are popping up in that message. And one that just popped up 17 minutes ago, hackers steal $655,000 after picking MetaMask seed from iCloud backup. So that organization just got $655,000 was just stolen within, you know, information. It's just happening. It's happening a lot, and they are out there. Whoops, wrong slide. So that's Maryland quoted that. 94% of malware is delivered by email. Again, we talked, this is why the phishing email and clicking on those links, it's the easiest thing to do. It's the easiest thing to do. Send an email, somebody clicks on it, here comes the malware, right? So just be wary of that. I don't know if many of you remember the Sony breach that happened I don't know, I think it was about 7 years ago, that was malware. Somebody clicked on a link and, you know, the story about all the movies and what information they got and whose email they got and all that. So yeah, that was started by just somebody clicking on a link. 56% of nonprofits do not require multi-factor authentication to log into an account. Again, think about your organization. Are you requiring it? More than half are not. And only 26% of nonprofits actively monitor their environment. So that means, I'm not sure, again, we talked about IT and cybersecurity, and IT is doing a great job at getting your computer, of keeping you up and running, of what you need to do in your day-to-day. But one of the things about monitoring their environment is something that we call vulnerability scanning, and it scans for those vulnerabilities. Remember I talked about Microsoft, Macintosh, Apple, they have these patches to patch systems. That's what is being scanned because these vulnerabilities are being found and they're doing patches. But only 26% of the nonprofits are scanning their environment. So with that, here we go. This is our Q&A. And everything that we addressed today, you know, Pocket Security can help. So I know Keaton's been answering questions in the chat. So if there are any questions, be happy to answer them. And Keaton?
Yeah, I saw a great question in chat earlier. Brian asked, should you just never scan QR codes? And that is a pretty good question. And again, it just comes down to kind of the same thought process you go through when trying to establish if something is legit or if it's a social engineering attempt. You know, if you're at a restaurant and, you know, the menus are now all QR codes, as a lot of restaurants shifted to during the pandemic, check the little, you know, the little square, wherever the QR code is, check that there's not a sticker placed over it or something. Check that it's actually, you know, it's a physical QR code printed out on it. Use kind of your best judgment to determine whether it is or isn't something you should actually be scanning, right? I think a few weeks ago there was a giant QR code that appeared in the sky. I believe it was over Vegas. It was like 300 to 500 drones up in the sky of a random QR code. I don't remember actually where it pointed to, the link it pointed to, but you know, that one in particular, you know, the FAA clearance somebody would need for 500 drones above Vegas, it's probably not malicious, right? But again, it sets an interesting precedent of, if there's a giant QR code in the sky, should I really, you know, it's an interesting precedent. So again, it's really a lot of trust, and it's a lot of using the same thought process to determine whether it is or isn't a threat or not. Leda, do you have any other thoughts on that?
You know, I agree with that. I mean, I know somebody mentioned about students, you know, especially if you're on a campus or if you're in downtown San Jose and there's a flyer with a QR code on it. You know, $50, if you scan this, $50 off, you know, if you go into the store to this restaurant or somewhere. So is that really a legit flyer with a QR code, or is that a hacker that's just going over and, you know, putting up QR codes for people to scan? So again, it's the risk and thinking that thought process of, you know, there's would I do it or not, right? So yeah, I agree with that. Thanks, Keaton.
Yeah, and then just real quick, Brian asked a follow-up question. If there was an app that can scan a QR code and show linked URLs without actually taking you automatically there. So actually, I think most modern smartphones now, they are popping up with a little notification of where the QR code is going to take you, and then you can click on the link. But I do believe there are actually apps specifically for that for some of the older phones. But again, yeah, I believe the newer models are showing where that code is going without automatically taking you there.
And you just mentioned apps, which is good. One thing I might add, to have an app in the Apple Store is very, very, they have to do a lot of hoops and security checks, and they do a lot of background on those companies that are getting into the Apple Store. Google has improved as well. At the beginning, back in the day, a lot of malicious apps were getting into the Google Play Store. but that has improved. That has improved as well. But just double check on, if there's certain apps that you want to download, what the background is with the company.
And earlier, Stephen asked if there was a best practices document for the assessment and use of Google Workspace, particularly around the sharing functions. Of that one, I'm actually unsure. I'm sure there are policies and actions laid out in some of the frameworks I mentioned around best cases for sharing or authenticating users. But as far as a specific document for that, without Googling it, I'm unsure.
Thank you. Daisy, you sent me, a question too, about storing sensitive information in Google Drive. Yeah, they've gone, if they weren't as safe as they should be, I mean, nothing is 100%, but you can store that information. I would definitely look at, if you're just doing Google Drive, for that sensitive information, I guess, if you're holding Social Security numbers, that would be something. If you have another system, like, I don't know what HR systems you have where you have to capture that. But credit card numbers, you shouldn't be putting credit card numbers there. I know Keaton mentioned PCI, and that's a whole other area, because with PCI, if you're taking credit cards, you need to be PCI compliant. And if you put credit cards like on your network and in your system, that brings your whole computer network into scope. And that means PCI, your whole system would need to be hardened for a credit card environment. So I'm not sure how you're taking credit cards, but definitely take a look at that as well for PCI, because I know that Pete mentioned that also. Let's see, Keaton, question in the chat.
Yeah, so Brian asks, is the free version of Avast security software adequate to screen incoming PDFs, zips, etc. for malware, etc.? On that one, again, not too sure. However, I do know that most antivirus software, they all share a similar list of malware, etc., etc. So it would probably be not as different as anything else.
Mm-hmm. Right. How often should you change passwords? That's what I like about the password manager. I change my password probably every couple of months, and it makes it easy with the password manager because you just go to the site, new password, change password, generate password, good to go. And you don't even have to worry what the password is. So you should change passwords if you're sharing documents or information, locations with people. When somebody leaves, definitely change the password, right? Because you don't want that password out there. If you are sharing, a shared drive or something where you're using the same password to something. But hopefully on most of your applications, you're not sharing passwords or you have different logins. And then Brian had a question about Microsoft Office 365 safe from hackers. Keaton, what would you say to that?
So I would say the question safe from hackers is almost not a loaded question, but nothing. I mean, I would always say nothing is safe, right?
Right.
Safe is a pretty strong word. Now there are better ways to store information. There are worse ways to store information. So it really depends on the policies you have in place. It really depends on the actions, right, that somebody has to go through to access your organization's Office 365 setup. So again, it's going to depend on what an admin, whatever the word is, things that you have in place.
The control, yeah. One of the things we talk about, people, process, technology. You'll hear that in IT security. Nothing's 100%, and it goes back, like he mentioned, also about risk. But yes, Office 365, Google, they would not be in business, and so many of us using them as we are using them. But I think part of it is when for Google, and I think they changed it, which was smart. If I had created a Google Sheet and I was sharing it with Nick, for example, and I wanted to share it with him, like the default used to be like public. When I'd share the link, it's like anybody with the link, it's public. That's what you want to be careful from. When you're sharing those informations now, especially using things out there instead of sending it with email, now the part is, who am I sharing this with? Am I just sharing it with this one person, or does anybody with the link have access to it? So it's more on that people and our process than sometimes the technology. So it's kind of our checks and balances with both people and technology. Great. These are great questions. Thank you, everybody. Do you do security? Yes. Kavitha, yes. Do you do for organization? And what would you need to do that? So Kavitha, yes, we do security assessments. And there's a contact form on the Pocket Security website, and you could fill out your information there and we can get a hold of you and walk you through that. But yeah, that's definitely a great starting point, is to do a security assessment within your organization. That's do you need to invest in search and monitor the Chromebooks of every student? Stephen, I'm just reading your question. Keaton, I don't know if you're reading his. Let's go. Or do you need to invest in services to monitor Chromebooks of every student? Students are smart. I'm just thinking of the Chromebook. It would be interesting, Stephen, is looking at the policies that you have in place. But when you're dealing with students, they're smart. You could set up, you could probably harden the Chromebook to where it needs to be, but it also depends on the access of what they're accessing, of putting those controls in place. So, when you're saying with monitoring the Chromebooks, they should get patched. They should, they should be able to have those downloads or be pushed to them. So, it depends how your infrastructure is set up. But having policies and practices in place is a way to start. But again, these students, the kids are smart, and they can do things. So sometimes you may want to invest in an infrastructure to help manage the Chromebooks, to patch them and to monitor them. Thanks for the question. Any other questions?
So,
looking at time. Keaton, go ahead.
Yeah, so Mariella asked how many different emails should we have for our accounts. She said she was told to create a separate email for finances and social media accounts because it increases safety. This one can kind of be a personal preference. I'm quite paranoid. I have dozens of email accounts for various things. If somebody is doing reconnaissance on your organization, whether they're trying to go through all of its employees, all of its people to find information, there are ways that they can establish connections between different accounts. Right? If they're sharing the same email, there are connections that they can establish, which could potentially lead to finding a database of breached passwords or breached emails, et cetera. So that one's going to be personal preference, really. I always err on the side of caution, and I have quite a few different emails for different purposes.
Yeah, and I think one thing too to add, there's another thing, and I don't always do this, but I've heard, and maybe Keaton, you do this. If you're using banking, use a different browser. Right? Some people, if you're using Firefox all the time, maybe for your banking, you want to use Chrome, right? Because if there's an issue with one browser, you use the other browser for certain things. So that's something I've heard as well.
Yeah, there's definitely some nasty things that can transfer over on the same browser. So it's a good practice to keep certain things entirely separate.
Well, great, thank you. All right. I guess I'll hand it over to SBCN. Thank you.
Yeah, does anyone have any other questions?
Sure.
I think we have another question in the chat.
Yes, Kavitha, yeah, definitely. Reach out to me and we can share the information. Again, we're a nonprofit for nonprofits. So we're also working on getting funding to help offset what costs would be, because we want to help. We know there's a lot of cybersecurity is big, and there's a lot of things that we need to do to protect ourselves. And this is the reason why I started this, because I know nonprofits have so much data and so much information, and you know, you're not different than any other companies that are out there with information. Thanks, everybody.